Blue Alpine Freeze Dryers is a new up-and-coming freeze drying manufacturer based in eastern Idaho. They've got a really exciting story about how they started their freeze drying company and how are they going to position themselves against some of the other freeze drying manufacturers in the space that we all know. So in this video, you're going to enjoy a casual conversation with Cory Marriott, who is the owner of Blue Alpine, and he's going to divulge a lot of information that you maybe didn't know about the company. Now, this interview is part of our Frozen Assets podcast series where we're focusing on entrepreneurs in the freeze drying space, as well as manufacturers and accessories. Anybody that's in the freeze drying space, we're focusing that on this particular series in this podcast. And if you're not a subscriber right now, this YouTube channel, hit the subscribe bell, or you can also listen to this on all your favorite podcast channels, including Apple and Spotify. If you're interested in starting a freeze drying business and you need to see what the ROI could be based on your product and what you're trying to sell it for, I've got a spreadsheet that can help you calculate your ROI as well as your profit margin, and it's a very easy spreadsheet to use. I created it on Google Spreadsheets, so it's very accessible. Go to the video description right now. You'll see a link for freezedrybusiness.com/spreadsheet. Freezedrybusiness.com is the website connected to this channel, and the spreadsheet is completely free to you. And I'll send that to you if you join my email list. So go ahead and put your email in there once you get to that landing page, and then I will send you a free spreadsheet for you to use for your freeze drying business. This is the full-length interview that I had with Cory, so if you can't stick around for the entire thing, I've got timestamps below in the video description. Now let's get to the interview, and I'll introduce you to Cory. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Frozen Assets podcast series, where we're interviewing entrepreneurs in the freeze drying space, from people who are producing products to also manufacturers of different equipment, accessories, just everything entrepreneurship in the freeze drying space. And fortunately, we actually have an entrepreneur in the freeze dryer manufacturer space. A new type of freeze dryer is being developed, and we're welcoming Cory, who is one of the co-founders and owners of Blue Alpine Freeze Dryers. Cory, thank you for coming on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're located, and about your company.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, by the way. Yeah, so we'll go with location first. That's easy. So we are in just southeast Idaho. We're kind of right by Yellowstone. So if anyone's ever passing through, going to Yellowstone for the summer, we'd love to have you, visit us. But yeah, so my brother and we started Blue Alpine about 4 or 5 years ago. I had originally bought a harvest right, and my brother and I were entrepreneurs through and through. So we looked at the market and we said, hey, this is a great opportunity to get into on the ground floor, because there was only Harvest Right at the time. There wasn't any other competitors. So we spent about, like 3 or 4 years developing that. And then, we've only been selling for about a year at this point. So, we started selling, what would that be? 2023, we started selling. And then now, being 2024, forever, for however old this video is when you're watching it. But yeah, so we've been just going gangbusters ever since. The market's really liked having a new competitor. And yeah, we've really enjoyed making freeze dryers. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to just kind of like improve on it, because making a freeze dryer is inherently kind of difficult. I talk a lot about Harvest Right, but at the same time, I have a ton of respect for Harvest Right, because I know how hard it is to build freeze dryers.
One of the questions I had was, there's a lot that goes into building a freeze dryer. So
Yep.
what were you trying to improve on? What was the most important factors for building your Blue Alpine freeze dryer?
So we always do a ton of market research before we get into any kind of like venture. So we had already done like 2 or 3 years before we even started of just market research and kind of listening to what people were saying online. So a lot of the complaints that we were hearing online were like, vacuum leaks and, just different things like that. I think that's really where we focused first, was vacuum leaks. So we came up with a few ideas. One of our kind of solves for that is actually a recipe that NASA uses for like feeding wires into a vacuum, or in a spaceship, it's like feeding wires outside of a capsule into a vacuum. But anyway, so just little things like that we just try to improve on. For example, the whole idea with Teflon tape, but Teflon tape is just a sealant, it's a lubricant, not a sealant. So that was another area that we tried to improve on early on, was just like, hey, how do we make these fittings seal better together? So what we use now is actually like a gasket material. It goes on as a liquid, and then it kind of hardens as like a hard rubber. But anyway, just little improvements like that kind of go a long way.
What all kind of comes with a Blue Alpine freeze dryer? How did you determine what size type of freeze dryer you're going to create, the tray size, what type of power you're going to use?
I would say that like medium to mediums, like our like Blue Alpine medium to the Harvest Right medium is actually pretty comparable. There's not a whole lot of differences, comes with the same package. What makes our mediums different? It's not a whole lot that makes it different. The power supply is going to be the same. It's going to be a 110 outlet, which is like the regular like 15 amp breaker. It's really in our large unit that we start to really kind of distinguish ourselves, or like where we really like pull ahead. So the medium units, and that's across the board, whether it's a Harvest Right, a Blue Alpine, the Stay Fresh, or the Cube, they all use like a 1/3 horsepower compressor for the refrigeration. So there's two factors when it comes to like how big a freeze dryer is, or capacity to freeze drying. So one factor is the tray space, and we get asked a lot, like, hey, how many trays do you have? How big are the trays? Things like that. Those are great questions to ask. But if you're doing food, that the trays are more important and tray spacing is more important when it comes to candy making. When you're doing food and like actually processing like a lot of water, the more important factor is actually the refrigeration capacity. So again, on the mediums across the industry, they all use a 1/3 horsepower compressor, which is pretty small. Like it's a smaller one. On the large unit though, ours uses a 1/2 horsepower compressor with like the largest piston that we could find. So we're actually moving twice as much refrigerant as the Harvest Right large. So Harvest Right uses a 1/3 horsepower compressor on their mediums and their large. With ours, we use 1/3 horsepower on our medium and that 1/2 horsepower on our large. So essentially that translates to, if you're doing food, it translates to like twice as much capacity in any given week or like any given year. You're going to be able to do twice as much food in our unit because it gets done twice as fast. It also could translate like cost savings for electricity. So, if it takes you 30 to 40 hours in a Harvest Right large to get a batch of food done, it takes ours like 20 to 24 hours. That's easily like a 2x savings as far as energy goes. On the large unit, it is still a 110 service, but it's going to need a 20 amp, just like the Harvest Right large. It needs a 20 amp breaker and a 20 amp receptacle. The receptacles themselves are only like $4 or $5 at Ace Hardware. So anyways, if you can put in a receptacle yourself, it's usually not too bad.
Think about your software. What's unique about it? What can it do for someone who's just beginning?
So our software kind of encompasses everything from like super basic user to super advanced user. So we have essentially, if you want to just be a super basic user, all you do is just press the button, press go, and it'll do its thing. We have a few recipes built in just to kind of like dial in. So like, for example, like candy is going to be a very different recipe, than like blueberries, like something like a delicate. So we've got a candy recipe that's built in. We've got delicates, fruits, we've got some greens, and then a meat recipe and a liquids recipe. So we have 6 recipes total. We're going to be adding more eventually, but we're just not quite there yet. We just need more space on the processor. We give the ability to control the pressure as well. So there's temperature, which is super important when it comes to freeze drying. If you get above the eutectic temperature of the food, you'll collapse the food. So temperature is super important. You don't want to, like, especially on delicates, for example, you don't want to go too hot because that delicate food will collapse and then it will get spongy and like it'll look like it's not dry even though it is. But pressure is a really nice thing to be able to control because you can dial in exactly how fast you want that heat to go into the food. So if you want to do a really aggressive cycle, you want it to be a super quick cycle, you can turn it all the way up to like 2,500 millitorr, and then it'll put all the heat into it that it can to bring it up to that pressure. Or if you want to go like a really soft cycle, you can dial it all the way down to 300 millitorr or 400 millitorr if you've got something super delicate. We try to give, on the advanced end, we've tried to give a little bit more control over the cycle, and controlling pressure is kind of one of those things that's more on the scientific end or like more on the industrial end.
What's the ideal mTOR for the Blue Alpine?
We really like about 900 millitorrs. So the problem with going really high and aggressive millitorrs, again, it gets the food done really, really fast, but you're going to end up sending more water to your pump. So there's this trade-off between like, well, how fast do I want, like, what's my time value? Like if I'm just trying to like run just gangbusters, and like if I'm running a business and it's like, hey, I want to make sure these batches are done in 24 hours so that when my employees can, change it out every day, then it's like running a more aggressive cycle would be yeah, at like 1200 or 2000 millitorr, that might be ideal for you. For the average Joe, though, like not really wanting to change the oil all the time, 900 millitorr is about a good middle of the road where you're still getting a pretty quick cycle, but you're not sending too much water to the pump. But if you want to, 100%, you can go down to 500, 600 millitorr, and then, you're changing the oil every 30 cycles. Like if changing the oil is like, hey, I hate changing the oil, if that's like your big thing, because I talk to a lot of people who are that way, that's like, I just don't want to change the oil. Then it's like, yeah, then, run it at 600 millitorr, 500 millitorr. You won't have to change the oil very often, but your cycles are going to take a little bit longer. So again, it's kind of whatever you want out of the machine. We've given the user that ability to kind of control that.
Why do you have to change the oil in the pump all the time?
So the oil will inevitably ingest a little bit of water, or like the pump ingests a little bit of water, and that's like across the industry, kind of no matter whose machine you're running. As that oil ingests water, it loses some of its lubricating properties. So let's say you didn't have any water in the system, like you were able to like keep all the oil or all the water out of the oil. That oil still loses some of its lubricating properties, just like in your car, like oil breaks down over time. The water just kind of speeds up that breakdown period. So that's kind of why like you still want to be changing the oil. I kind of think of it kind of like a car engine where I try not to ask like, hey, how little can I change the oil? I've seen vacuum pumps last only 6 months because like the oil was never changed. And then I've seen, vacuum pumps that lasted 10 years because she was changing the oil every time. Like no matter who you're buying from, the vacuum pump is a consumable, regardless of like which brand you go with. That's kind of why I stress a lot of like changing the oil, just that way, if it's a consumable, you can extend the life of that consumable.
What type of does come with the Blue Alpine, and why did you select this pump? And
Yeah.
Does a pump make a big difference?
We kind of just selected the oil pump. It's called a rotary vane pump. The rotary vane pump is essentially like the AK-47 of pumps. It's like just a down and dirty pump, but it's very effective because what's happening in the oil pump or the rotary vane pump is that oil is actually creating the seal. With a scroll pump or like an oilless pump, it's actually a metal on metal seal. So that if that metal on metal seal gets tarnished at all, then you're gonna lose your vacuum. And then in a scroll pump, there's also a dry seal. It's called a tip seal that goes around the scroll. So if you could imagine like a little spiral piece of metal, there's a little piece of rubber around it that sits on the edge. That's called a tip seal. That tip seal is dry, like there's nothing lubricating it. So, spinning around at, 10,000 RPMs, I mean, it just wears out. Whereas with the oil pumps or the scroll pumps, or sorry, the rotary vane pumps, that oil itself is what's making the seal. So even if there's a little bit of damage from like food particles or something getting into the rotary vane, if there's any damage to the rotary vane at all, the oil will seal that up. I mean, you can get, like pretty good damage to the rotary vane, and that oil is going to be able to overcome some of those into tolerance.
So one thing I've really wanted is Bluetooth so that I can know when a cycle is done and not have to be present. Does that exist within your software? Or are you putting that in development? What can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that is in the works. So currently this is our Rev 2 machine. So Rev 1 was like our first 100, 125 units. This is Rev 2. We'll be doing Rev 2 for, from say like 7-8 months ago all the way up until about a year from now. So we'll probably be, producing a couple thousand Rev 2s. But our goal is to get to Rev 3, and Rev 3 is going to be sweet. So Rev 3 is going to have individually controlled tray racks. So each tray rack will have a sensor, and the computer itself will actually be inside the vacuum chamber. So we'll be able to individually control each one. If like one of them's not performing right, then it can dial in itself. Or if there's redundancy there where like, if we have a sensor go out, then, it's not going to throw the whole machine out of whack. It'll just slave to the next, that one will just slave to the next one above it. So anyways, with all of that, that's where our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capability is going to be, happening. So Rev 3, we are adding like a Wi-Fi chip, and then we're going to be working on building an app. We're still probably like a year away on that, but that is our goal, is to, eventually move to Rev 3. There's a lot of hardware, a lot of R&D that is going to have to go into it, but that's the goal.
Tell us a little bit about the size of freeze dryers you have. You said you have a medium, but now you're going to be launching a large. Is that currently available today? and what's going to be the differences in that type of machine?
The large is currently available. We were pre-selling it before, but as of the recording of this video, we are in stock on them. So we've got about a 1 to 2 week lead time. Our lead times change quite a bit, but yeah, we are in stock, at least on the larges, and then we're currently producing the larges and the mediums. We are eventually going to be coming out with a small and an extra large, but our medium unit, as far as sizing goes, so our medium unit, it has it has a 9x13 pan in it. So it's a standard quarter sheet pan. You can pick them up at Walmart. And then our large unit is exactly double that. So our large unit is 5 trays that are 13 by 18 cookie sheets. So if you've got like aluminum cookie sheets at your house, like it's the same cookie sheet that goes into our large. So we are trying to kind of make everything like standardized. So that way it's easier to work on, it's easier to find parts for. You don't have to buy trays from us. You can go down to Walmart and buy trays, just things like that. So yeah, currently the medium and the larges are the only 2 sizes that we've got.
Do me a favor right now and give this video a thumbs up. It really helped the video accelerate in the YouTube algorithm to more and more people who are interested in freeze drying and knowing what's out there. A lot of people are searching for what freeze dryer is best for them, whether they're starting out in home use or as a freeze drying business. And so giving that video a thumbs up really helps this video go out to those searches that people are doing on YouTube. That really help out this video. All right, let's get back to the interview and talk more about Blue Alpine Freeze Dryers. So tell me a little bit about those trays. I'm just curious, does it have to be certain materials that the trays have to be? Kind of like that idea that you don't have to necessarily buy the manufacturer's trays. So tell us a little bit about what you know about trays.
Stainless steel is great for cooking. So if you're doing a commercial kitchen and you're doing food, you probably do need stainless steel. But again, it's a standard size tray. I mean, if you wanted to find stainless steel quarter sheets or stainless steel half sheets, you can go find them, like they're out there. So if you're a manufacturer, stainless steel is probably what you want just for food safety purposes. But I think that food manufacturers can use aluminum though. And aluminum is actually a better conductor of heat. So that was one thing that we learned a lot about when we were actually developing our pots, or like the vacuum chamber itself. We actually started with aluminum pots. And anyways, we liked aluminum because it transfers heat so much better than stainless steel. Aluminum is probably like 10 times better at transferring conductive heat than stainless steel is. So if you are looking from a food safety standpoint, stainless steel is always going to be better. But if you're looking towards like efficiency and how well that heat transfers into the food, then aluminum is probably going to be better in that case. But yeah, those are kind of the 2 options that you've got as far as cookie sheets go.
Who do you kind of target to, and who should be taking a look at a Blue Alpine? Who makes sense to buy?
Probably about 50% of our customers are candy makers. And it just seems like every one of them is just growing and growing. Like we'll talk to one person, they'll say, hey, I need 1 machine. And then they'll call back a few months later, hey, I need 2 machines. And it's like, oh man, like they're growing really fast. So I would say, that makes sense on the commercial side. And for anyone that's buying a commercial unit, I generally say, hey, you probably want a large. If you're all about minimum viable product, where it's like, hey, I just want to get into it as cheap as possible, medium is fine, but I generally see that people outgrow their mediums pretty quick. If you're cooking for more than 5 people, you probably want to look at the large. If you're cooking for less than 5 people, you probably want to look at the medium. But yeah, I mean, I think that our units are designed around both of those kind of customer bases. Because on the commercial side, we've got like a candy recipe that's kind of honed in for getting candy done really quick. But then, there's other recipes that are totally meant just for the home user. So we've kind of tried to encompass both sides of the market.
My next question is going to be more about your machine. When it's shipped out to customers, what type of warranty does it come out with? What type of service do you provide ongoing for? And any type of other resources?
That's one thing that we are really trying to differentiate ourselves. Being a newcomer to the market, we really are trying to have the best customer service out there as part of it. So I'm one of the owners of the company. There's 3 brothers that own the company together. 2 of them are engineers. I'm the odd man out. I'm not an engineer. I used to be a firefighter paramedic. As one of the owners, I've really taken it personally as far as making sure we had good customer service and good quality. So I've been on the front end up until this point. I've been on the front end and taking all the phone calls, taking all the emails. So if there is any quality problems, I can literally take it right back to the line and say, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix it. So we get one call like a quality problem and it's like, hey, that might just be a fluke. If we get 2 calls on the same issue, then I take it, I take it like pretty seriously, and it's like, hey, we've got to dial this in.
Yeah.
So our philosophy is that if we can make good quality machines, then it makes the customer service side of things so much easier for ourselves. If we start good to start with, then it just makes that easier. As far as the warranty goes, so we do a 12 months of use warranty, not just 12 months, not just 12 calendar months. So if we have failed, we're going to own that. So, if we've sent out a bad machine, we're going to own that machine, and we're going to say, hey, like, if it's down, heaven forbid, for a month or something, then it's like that doesn't count against the warranty. So, that month that it's down adds to the back end of the warranty. So on any component, it's 12 months of use. And then on the refrigeration, it's 3 years of use. So the refrigeration really shouldn't go bad. I mean, it should be like a 15, 20-year system. So if the refrigeration fails in the first 3 years, it's like, hey, that's on us. Like, we got to fix that. So that's kind of the difference between the two. But the pumps, for example, I mean, if you abuse a pump, like, it could fail in 6 months. So, that's why, the complete warranty is only for a year, just because the pumps are an expected failure. They're, consumable item.
You've been developing these freeze dryers. What has surprised you the most about applications with freeze drying as you started experimenting with different things? Maybe you're aware of different entrepreneurs and people trying different things, but what's kind of surprised you now that you've been
Yeah.
in space for several years?
Two really weird applications that come to mind that are like from the business standpoint is freeze dried breast milk. So my wife is pregnant currently, so we've dabbled in that a little bit. But there's actually a NICU doctor that bought one of our units, and being a NICU doctor, he is kind of on the front lines of, like, taking care of babies, obviously. So NICU babies, they need a higher density, like, calorie to volume. So anyway, so what he does is he freeze dries the breast milk and then concentrates it, like uber concentrates the breast milk for the NICU babies. So every drink that they get is like way more calorie dense. So that was a really weird application for a business that I hadn't even thought of. It's like, oh, that's amazing. And another really weird but kind of cool, like, business that we heard of was taxidermy. So apparently freeze drying with taxidermy is totally a thing. Kind of on the same end, but, like, it's like floral design. There's, like, freeze drying for floral design. So that was kind of another interesting one that I hadn't heard of. Currently, we're actually working with a guy in Singapore that's going to be doing breast milk as well. He's not a doctor, but the doctor was down in LA doing it here. But anyways, we've had 2 or 3 customers that are doing the breast milk thing.
I really think that what sets you apart that I've heard so far in this conversation is, your preloaded recipes on your machine, because there's been so much guessing across
Yeah.
Facebook pages and
Yep.
even comments from viewers that are watching my videos, and even myself in 2020 when I started freeze drying. It's like there's been a lot of guessing. And so, the machines that we currently have today have now introduced more of a candy mode, which it seems like
Mhm.
everyone has. But now that you've got different recipe settings, it's more easy for someone who's a beginner or a novice to just go in and say, yeah, I'm going to freeze dry dog treats and freeze dry these livers and things like that. And you've already got a pre-setting for meat. So that, I think that's really great, Cory.
Yeah, and Rev 3, the processor is going to be way bigger. This one, on Rev 2, we're a little limited on space on the processor. So we've only got those 6 recipes. But on Rev 3, we're hoping to have like a really big process, essentially like a mini computer. And we want a lot of recipes and the ability to plug in your own recipes. So anyways, yeah, I think Rev 3, we're going to send it out with at least like 18 different recipes to really dial it in, where it's like, hey, here's a blueberry recipe, here's a banana recipe, like, here's a watermelon or like a melon recipe. Like, anyways, and then, dog food or meat. Like, anyways, we really want to dial in, like, on Rev 3, like, there's a lot of really cool functionality that we've got planned for that one.
Where can people buy the Blue Alpine? Is it available only on your website? Do you have dealers out there? How do you distribute your freeze dryers?
We've been approached by a few big stores, like name brand stores that you would recognize, but they essentially said, like, hey, that's cute, come back to us when you're bigger. Like,
Yeah.
currently we're only selling on our website, but that is the goal, is to eventually get into distributors, get into retail stores and stuff like that. But currently it's just on our website. So just bluealpinefreezedryers.com.
If you're interested in a Blue Alpine, check out my video description of this interview. and you can go directly to Blue Alpine and check out all of their things. What advice do you have for someone who is taking a look at maybe a current product? There's competition, just like you and your brothers kind of looked at with other freeze dryer brands, entrepreneurs who want to do something in an industry that currently has a big leader, but wants to get into it.
So like if you can, I think Alex Ramosi says this, but if you can, delay gratification, like delay seeing any results from your work for like 6 months, you can change yourself. Think of like going to the gym, like, you work out for 6 months, like you'll change yourself. If you can delay gratification for like 2, 3, 4 years, you can change your company. If you can do it for 10 years, you can change your industry. If you can do it for a lifetime, you can change the world. So you think about like Elon Musk on the other end of that spectrum. So going to the gym, if you can delay seeing those results for 6 months, you can change yourself. Whereas Elon Musk, on the other hand, he's delaying his gratification. Like he may not see the results of some of his work for his entire lifetime. Like he may be dead before he sees some of the results. But Elon Musk is changing the world. So the longer time frame you can put out from seeing results, like literally just coming in and just grinding every day, the bigger your payout will be. So for us, for example, we spent 3 months developing just the feed through, just the wiring harness. Took us 3 months. We came into work every day, 8 to 5. I mean, me and Tim, sorry, we don't take breaks, like we don't take vacations. We
Yeah.
spent thousands and thousands of dollars on this one part. And it was like that for years before we like had enough product, had enough like experience before we launched. So, that would be my advice, is just pick an industry or something that you love enough to work on it every single day for years and years, and then eventually that will pay off. But the longer time frame you can do that, the bigger that payout's going to be.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Cory, for joining me on this channel and just telling us about Blue Alpine. I think it's really great that there's more and more options out there for freeze drying because it makes everyone else be better, but also there's different options for you to choose. And I think we've already shown and you've talked about what that differentiates is. So thanks a lot for joining me today.